In this episode of Ask Paul Kirtley, we are going to talk about why my podcasts play too fast, some thread for fixing gear and for use as fishing line, the expected lifespan of a Bahco Laplander, and when to upgrade from a Gransfors small forest axe. Welcome to episode 87 of Ask Paul Kirtley, where I answer your questions about wilderness bushcraft, survival skills, outdoor life in general. Try not to answer too many kit questions, but of course we all need kit, so I do answer them occasionally, and there are a few today, but in a roundabout way. And I think they're all valid questions based on my experience. So let's have a look. First off, let's have a listen to this one. This is more of a help desk question, but...
Hi, my name's Tony. It's a question about your podcasts, in that they always seem to play really, really fast, or you're breathing too much helium. Cheers. Really big fan of your work. Bye.
Well, if I'm being obtuse, I'm not sure there's even a question there, Tony, but I think the question is, why do you find my podcasts play too fast? It isn't because I record them too fast. It isn't, or too slow, so that when they play back faster. It isn't that I'm on helium or anything else. The only thing I'm on is coffee normally when I'm recording these. And that might speed me up a little bit, but some people say I talk too slowly anyway, but then some people don't have a very large attention span. I would say not knowing what device you're listening to the podcast, and I'm assuming you're talking about Ask Paul Kirtley's as well, not knowing what you're listening on, whether you're listening via the player on my website, whether you're listening via SoundCloud, whether you're listening via one of the many platforms that it's distributed out to. My podcasts go out to Apple, what used to be called iTunes, Apple Podcasts. It goes out to Spotify. It goes out to all manner of other podcast players, either directly or via an RSS feed. The Ask Paul Kirtley similarly go out to a broad range of places, as well as being put on YouTube. So, and I also don't know whether you're using a phone, what model of phone you're using, whether you're using a native app to play a downloaded MP3. I don't know whether you're using a tablet, or whether you're using a laptop or a desktop, or whether you're trying to do it via your TV. I have no idea. But I would say, it's not down to the hosting of the audio files, because they all come from one place. They're all checked. They all play at normal speed. I would say the problem is the player. Yeah, you've either got your player set to double speed or somewhere in between single speed and double speed, or your player is not interacting with the MP3 file correctly, because if you play it through a normal MP3 player, it will play absolutely fine. So that's all I can say, is check the speed that the player is at. It isn't the master files. It isn't some global conspiracy to irritate you. It is just the interaction between whatever technology you're using and the MP3 file, but it isn't the file itself. And the reason I answered that is because I've had a couple of other people say the same thing to me, but it's nothing to do with the way that they're produced. Okay, let's have a look. Thread for fixing gear and fishing line.
Hello Paul, this is Thomas Owens. Wondering what would be the most ideal thread or line to use for repairing kit, but also to use as a fishing line. Thanks, mate.
That's an interesting question. Kind of more at the survival kit end of the spectrum, really, I guess. So having multiple uses from one thing. The best stuff I have found, and I honestly don't know where it came from originally, but when I was a child, probably early teens really, my mum's sister, my auntie, bought me a kite, and it was a big kite, and it was a good kite, and eventually the kite got broken and ripped and lost and whatnot, but I kept the strings, and that string was super fine. I would say it was about 1 to 2 mil at most. It's super fine. It was brown, it was slightly shiny, it was really strong. But I kept most of it, and I rewound it onto various bobbins and things. And indeed, I did have a little bit in one of my survival kits for many years. I've still got some in one of my sewing kits. Excuse me, I just had a cereal bar before I started this. Excuse me. Still got some in my repair kits, and it's great. You know, you can use it for little lashings and whipping. I have used it to fix equipment. I've used it for sewing packs on the go, and also you could use a good length of that as a fishing line. Absolutely, you could use it particularly for something like dropping monofilament droppers off on a night line or something like that. It would work extremely well. But you could also use it directly on a line in the same way, you know, whether it was everything from ice fishing, where you often use non-nylon line anyway, excuse me, through to just, you know, a hobo type arrangement. That would be a good thing. So I would investigate kite lines, because they're very strong for the diameter, beyond the usual use of sort of paracord and all that kind of stuff that you will have heard about many times before. So that's my best advice, and it's one that I still use now. Oh, I really am sorry. Let's have a look. Next question. We did that one last time. I want to talk about parangs again. Laplanders, that's what we want.
Hey Paul, this is Dave Wellsby from Canada, and I just wanted to first of all thank you for publishing your book. It is a great addition to anyone's library. If you're listening to this and you haven't gotten one of Paul's books, I would suggest that you pause this now and go and order one. Second of all, I wanted to thank you for all the free information that you put out, whether it be on your website, your blog, or your YouTube channel. It's greatly appreciated, and it is fantastic information, first class. And third, I wanted to ask you the question. The question is, have you ever broken a Bahco Laplander saw blade? And what do you think the lifespan of one of those blades would be for somebody who uses it appropriately, but uses it on a regular basis, such as yourself? Thanks for everything you do, and I hope to hear from you soon.
Well, always good to hear from you, Dave. Dave often comments on my material on Facebook and YouTube and whereabouts, and he isn't a paid plant for as an ad for my book. I'm glad you enjoyed the book, Dave, and thank you for your positive words there. Anybody that doesn't know about my book, Wilderness Axe Skills and Campcraft, can go to wildernessaxeskills.com. There's a website there. It's my website, not my publisher's website. It's my website, but it's dedicated to the book, and there are links to where you can buy the book local to you. And also, if you want to order a signed copy from me, you can do so via that website, and I will ship it to anywhere that the website allows you to add a country. You know, there's a drop down menu, and so as long as your country's on there, I'll be able to ship it to you, because it pulls those lists from our postal service here. So yeah, Bahco Laplanders. I've been using Bahco Laplanders for years, and some people criticize me for still using Laplanders when other people have migrated to things like Silkies. I think Silkies are good saws. They work extremely well in the right hands, and they are more aggressive often than the Bahco of the same size. I've got a big boy which I use for more arboricultural type jobs, but for my personal small saw, and don't forget the Bahco Laplander was originally designed as a pruning saw as well. It is a pull saw like the Silkies. In some ways it's the original one, and it was popularized in bushcraft and survival circles when it was taken up by some of the bushcraft and survival instructors back in the day, you know, when we're talking about Lars Falt and Ray Mears, and when those guys were, you know, starting to use Moras a lot. They also took on Bahco saws, which again another Scandinavian brand, and used those in combination, and they work very well as a combination. And I still use a Bahco now, and one of the things I like about them is it's extremely difficult to break the blades. And I know the argument with a Silky, for example, and I've seen multiple Silkies that have been used by my students. I've seen them break, and it's usually when they get pinched, you know, so you're sawing and it pinches and it's on the stroke back to pull, and it buckles and it shatters. And I've seen them break in multiple places in the same instance. One, I had a student where he pinched it. I wasn't present. They were building a shelter several hundred meters away from where I'm sitting at the moment, and one of his companions came up and said he'd cut himself with the saw, and what had happened was the blade had broken basically at both sides of where it was trapped in the wood. He was sawing a piece of wood for the shelter. The tip had broken off, and it had broken nearer to the handle and the section. So there were three bits: the bit that was still attached to the handle, the bit in the middle, and the tip. And there's a photo of that on my Instagram somewhere. And I've got nothing against Silky. I think they make some good products, but I think it's also worth seeing these things. I do not get paid. For any endorsements or advertisements for equipment, and my views are based on my experiences. And okay, they're not everyone's experiences, I get that, but I have seen Silkies break. I used to have a professional tree surgeon who worked on my team. He'd had them break on him. I've had members of my team try out various different Silky saws, and they've had them break on them. And these are not people who are crap with tools. They are good. They are professional. Some of them are professional tree surgeons. Some of them are people who are seriously into their woodwork, who use woodwork for part of their profession, and they are not idiots using tools, and they've had them break on them. And yes, it's often when they pinch, and people say, well, they're pull saws, you shouldn't use any force on the way back. Well, if you don't use any force when you take the saw back to where you're going to pull from, it won't move. That's just laws of physics. You can't move something without applying force. Admittedly, you need less force, but the fact of the matter is that's when they tend to break. And for me, the reason I continue to use a Laplander is that has never happened to me with a Laplander, and it's never happened to any of my colleagues with a Laplander, and it's never happened with any of my students with a Laplander. And so, regardless of the safety issue, like this guy who broke one of our intermediate courses, he ran the shattered end, the sheared end of the saw into his hand somehow. It wasn't that bad a cut in the end. It seemed more extreme than it was at the time. But I have a box full of Laplanders that I lend to students on courses, and these students are people who are inexperienced, and I give them a tool that's robust. Can you bend the tip on one? Yes. Can you, in extremis, if you actually stuck it in a crack and really cranked it round, could you probably snap the tip of a Bahco off? Yes, but I would say you'd have to take it beyond 90 degrees. And I've never seen that happen by accident. And then you've got the issue of if you're using, say I have a separate Bahco that I keep in my safety kit when I'm canoeing, and that's for sawing through wooden thwarts, etc. If someone's trapped, you know, if the bottom of a plastic boat, the bottom of a Royalex or polypropylene boat, has folded up and trapped somebody's leg under a kneeling thwart or a seat, I can saw through that quickly, and I keep that in my kit. I don't use it for sawing firewood around camp, so it's, you know, it's brand new teeth in there. And again, it's like, okay, might a more aggressive saw be a better choice for that? Perhaps. But I know that even when I'm pumped full of adrenaline trying to get that person out of that situation, I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to, even if it pinches or what have you, and all those forces going on, I know it's highly unlikely to break. So in my experience of having used Laplanders for over 20 years, I've never broken one. I lent my personal one to a student when I was working on a woodlaw course years ago up in northern Sweden. He came, he got it trapped in some wood. He kinked it in 2 places. Yeah, it didn't break. I then took my Leatherman and bent it back into shape, and I was able to use it for the rest of that trip. But it also reinforced my rule that I have, which is I don't lend personal equipment to students on courses ever. And that was one of the exceptions that I made, and it came back bent. The other exception to that rule that I made once was I lent my really nice black diamond metal bladed snow shovel to somebody, and he used it to knock branches off a tree, and that came back bent, and I had to bend that, a different guy, I had to bend that back with a Leatherman as well. So it's worth having a Leatherman with you. But I don't lend equipment to students, but even students who use things in a pretty rough way that are inexperienced haven't managed to break my Laplander, is what I'm saying. So I am on my 2nd Laplander handle ever, and it was simply because the press button on my first one broke after about 15 years. The plastic where you press the button in, where it's attached to the handle, cracked and broke, and I guess that's just repeated strain. That broke. In terms of the blades, I would say typically I replace mine every 2 years. If I'm working full kind of course seasons, I tend to replace them after 2 years. In terms of the ones that we have for students, it varies, but I just look for the wear patterns, and I look for students starting to spend a bit too much time sawing things on courses, and then I swap the blades out. And they're easy to swap out, and we tend to keep the same handles, swap out the blades. Although bizarrely, it's often cheaper to buy a whole new saw than it is to buy a replacement blade for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, the handles last a long time, and the blades, for me personally, I would say on average every 2 years I replace them. So hopefully that answers. Don't get me wrong, I don't want a bunch of people going on about silkies below. Use what you want. Use what you want. The question was about what I use. Starting to rain again. That's why I'm sat under this tarp by the fire again this week. Okay, another tool question. You know, and people joke about me not liking kit questions, but one of the things that differentiates bushcraft, woodcraft, if you like, from more generic outdoor activities is really the use of cutting tools and the interaction with wood in particular. And so it's worth us having a good understanding of the pros and cons of various tools. So this is a question from Instagram, which is one way you can ask me one of these questions. And this is from Aaron, whose Instagram handle is Aspirant Woodsman. And he's tagged this question with hashtag AskPaulKirtley. So when I searched Instagram for that hashtag, I found his post. He said, "Hi, Paul Kirtley, hope all is good with you. I thought I'd try turning one of my comments into an official APK question. So here goes. Under what situations is there a need to upgrade a Gransforsbruch small forest axe to the longer handled and heavier forest or felling axe? Are the bigger axes better suited to winter conditions and working within a team when the weight of the bigger axe can be shared by distributing heavy items amongst a group? I'm guessing a group of people will also require processing more firewood and therefore need the bigger axe to take down bigger trees quickly. If so, can I also ask what type of saw you would pair with a bigger axe? Thanks for everything you do, Paul. Glad to hear you're back. Take care. Aaron. And yes, those are your postcards in the bottom right of the photo, proudly on display. Some of the early book orders that I sent out, I added some of the limited edition Frontier Bushcraft postcards that we had made a few years ago in there with a personal note on there. They're all gone now, unfortunately. But you can still get a signed copy of the book from me, as per Dave says. Dave says you must get a copy. So Aaron's question, and I think it's more weighted towards winter, really, and I'll aim the question primarily at that. Personally, if a full-size felling axe, I really only use that for felling. I have a full-size Gransfors felling axe, and just to be clear, as an aside, I am not sponsored by Gransfors. Someone suggested to me recently, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, jokingly, said to me, "Oh, you're sponsored by Gransfors, aren't you? Your book's sponsored by Gransfors." Okay, there's quite a lot of the axes in my book are Gransfors axes. They're just the axes I have. There's also Vetterlings, there's also Hultafors, and I also have a Julia Kaltoff's carving axe, which I love using. So I've got a range of different axes that I use. But in terms of the range of sizes that I have to show on my courses, it's primarily Gransfors Brooks and Hultafors. And Holtzbrook, as you might know it over in the US. For some reason the branding is slightly different. So the question is, small forest axe, which is a half length axe or a half axe that's got quite a light head that a lot of people use. I would say it's probably the most popular modern bushcraft axe. A lot of people have that one or a similar size axe from a different manufacturer, whether it's Vetterlings or Holtz, and there are some others out there as well. The question then is, when do you give that one up for, say, a 3/4 length axe, which is the Scandinavian forest axe? Also, Holtz make a couple that are that size with different heads on them. And it is a winter question. There's also the Gransfors Raymir's Wilderness axe as well, which is like the Scandinavian forest axe, but with a heavier head. It's basically got a thicker poll, a heavier head on it, which works well in the boreal in particular. So that's the sort of size axe that we're taking. So what's the advantage of that size axe? It's got a longer handle. It's like a small felling axe, although the head is about half the weight of a full-size felling axe. So you get 3/4 of the leverage that you get with a full-size felling axe, but you get half the head weight. With a Scandinavian forest axe, the Wilderness axe is a bit heavier. And so it's quite a nice happy medium. I mean, it's an absolute brilliant limbing axe. So one of the things that I would use it for in the UK is I might fell something with a felling axe, but then I'll take all the branches off with a 3/4 length axe. And that's something that it's really, because of the length of it as well, when you've got a trunk down on the ground, it's just the right length to take branches off the side of the tree. And that's one of the things it's great for. But you can also use it for felling. So just as a one-stop shop, as a small felling axe, as a light felling axe, and then a limbing axe, it's brilliant for all of those jobs. It's awkward for carving because the handle's a bit too long. The counterbalance when you strangle the axe up high is too much, even though the head is perfectly, if you had that head on a shorter handle, you could carve with that. It's the handle length that makes it awkward. Similarly, for some of those hand splitting techniques that you will have seen on my blog, you'll have seen in some videos, you will have seen in my book, if you have my book, that hand splitting technique that I use a lot is awkward with a 3/4 length axe. Some of the other splitting techniques are easier with a 3/4 length axe. And so really part of the question is, what do you want to do? Are you primarily felling and limbing, or are you primarily doing small splitting and small carving around camp? That's one of the differentiators between which one you would choose, whether you're in the summer or the winter. When you come to winter camping, and particularly hot tenting, you're going to need to process firewood. You're going to need less firewood than if you're just out in the open, but you're still going to need plenty of firewood, and that might be felling dead standing wood. It might then be sectioning with a saw, and the saw I would combine is really just the same. A 24-inch saw blade is what I take on a winter trip. I tend to take a wooden buck saw, folding buck saw, the wood is good in the hand, even with gloves on, if you're holding some plastics that are quite conductive, but certainly metal frame saws, they're much more conductive than wood, even through a glove or a mitt. So I like a wooden saw for the winter, wooden frame saw, 24-inch blade. If all I am cutting is dead standing wood, I'm not cutting any green, then I will put a seasoned wood blade on that saw, so it's just regular teeth all the way along, not a general purpose blade that can also cut green wood with the raker teeth on. That's less efficient for dead standing wood because it's got less teeth over the full length of the blade. So a dead standing seasoned wood saw blade, I use that in combination with a 3/4 length axe to answer that question. On a winter trip, I like a 3/4 length for felling and limbing, and you can also section with the axe as well, although I tend to use the saw unless I think the saw is going to get pinched the way that the tree's fallen. Sometimes you can't move it because of the way it's fallen, and sawing into it is only going to get the saw pinched. Being able to section with the axe is also a useful skill there. Again, that's all in the book, but there's also, I've got videos on my YouTube channel about doing that stuff in winter from years ago. Some of my earlier videos on my YouTube channel, probably from about 8 years ago and 9 years ago, maybe even are there, and you can see me doing that stuff for real. And I would say if you are a group, it would be good to have at least one 3/4 length, whether that's just a Scandinavian forest axe or there's a slightly heavier headed wilderness axe, and then also a small forest axe, because the small forest axe is very good for the small splitting. You're going to cut stuff down like a 4-dog stove, or the stoves that come with the snow trekker tents. The length of that wood that will fit in those stoves is about the length that works really well for hand splitting with a small forest axe. So if between you in your group, even if there's only 2 of you, you have a Scandinavian forest axe and a small forest axe, you've got all the axes you need to do each job quite efficiently, because felling some of the really knotty, close grained, dead standing wood in the boreal with a small forest axe, it's too light for that job, and sectioning it again, it's too light for that job. But it's great for the splitting around camp when you're processing it down into your kindling, making feather sticks, or just small rounds to go into the or half rounds to go into the stove. And equally that between the leg splitting technique, again, there's a video of it on my YouTube channel, but it's also featured in my book. And it's on my blog. That between the leg splitting technique, which works really well on snow because you don't have a solid surface to work down on, you can only do that with a half-length axe. Once you progress to a 3/4 length axe, it's really difficult to do. You have to do a side, kind of almost like a croquet swing, or like some sort of cross between a croquet swing and a golf swing off to the side. And that works fine with a 3/4 length, but it takes a little bit more practice perhaps than the other one. So if I had to take one, I would take the 3/4 length, because I can do everything, even if some of the smaller jobs are a bit awkward. If there's a group of us, I would make sure that there's a 3/4 length and a half in there. And if there was a group of us to take more axes than those 2, there's nothing wrong. If you're on a toboggan trip, there's no reason why you can't have more axes split between the group. I would say towards the 3/4 length axes, and then maybe have at least one small forest axe for communal use, just close to the tent or tents for splitting small stuff when you need it split down and not left as a round. And that's it really. It doesn't give you a hard and fast black and white answer, I know, but that's the best I can try and give you an idea of my thinking there. When we do trips, when it's myself and a couple of my friends, colleagues, I tend to take a Scandinavian forest axe because that's what I've got. My friend Ian has a wilderness axe, he takes that, and then we'll just make sure that we've got a small forest axe between us as well. So if there's 4 of us, we might have 3 axes, 2 bigger axes and 1 smaller one. Is that best for everyone? No. I don't want a bunch of people below saying, why'd you do that? Do something else. It's just that that's what we do. I'm telling you what we do. And the question was specifically about moving from a half length to a 3/4 length. And the suggestion was it was about choosing stuff for winter. So if I was choosing one axe, 3/4 length axe, Scandinavian forest axe. If I was choosing two axes, one of each, I would say, in the group as a minimum. That would be a good place to be. Because of course you might also want an ice screw. You might want an ice auger. Somebody else might want an ice auger in their toboggan, and you might also want a couple of snow shovels as well. So you're thinking about all of that equipment. You know, you don't each need one, but you want that stuff divided amongst the group. You know, an ice chisel or an ice auger to get through the ice. I think that was that the last one? Starting to lose the light anyway. Short days at this time of year. Haven't had to turn the infrared on yet recently. Yep, that was it. Podcast played too fast. Hopefully that sorted it. Thread for fixing gear and fishing line, expected lifespan of a Bahco Laplander, and when to upgrade from a small forest axe. That's what we covered today. So thank you for your attention. Thanks for listening, however you're listening to this, whether it's on a podcast stream, whether it's via my blog, whether it's via my SoundCloud channel, whether it's via YouTube. Please send in some questions. I'm getting through the questions now. There's definitely space for more questions coming in. I really like the SpeakPipe ones, but as I said before, Twitter, Instagram, or send me an email in response to one of the emails that comes from my blogs. Make sure you put hashtag #AskPaulKirtley in any of them, though, if it's a written communication, so I can find them. It needs to be a public post on Twitter. It needs to be a public post on Instagram, like Aaron's post there with the axes and the question hashtag #AskPaulKirtley. That was a great example of that. So thank you for the questions. Thank you for those that have sent them in. I know there's still a few waiting to be answered, but I have to say at this point there aren't that many. So please, if you've got questions, please send them in, and I will record more of these as and when the questions come in. Also, check out my podcast, my main Paul Kirtley podcast. A lot of people think that Ask Paul Kirtley is my podcast, and yes, it does go out as a podcast. So strictly speaking, it is one of my two podcasts. But I also have the Paul Kirtley podcast, which is a long form discussion podcast. It doesn't go out as a video. It is just an audio podcast that goes out on all of the main audio podcast channels. So that's Apple Podcasts, it's Google Podcasts, it's Spotify, all of the other distributed players where RSS feeds get fed out. And you can also listen to it on my blog as well. Search for the Paul Kirtley podcast. You can go to my blog and find those, and then there's links there to all the different platforms, and definitely listen to those as well if you've not listened to them before, because there's a ton of knowledge there from my guests. I have a lot of guests on those from a wide-ranging set of disciplines, both in terms of people who are specifically involved with bushcraft, survival, ethnobotany, foraging, lots of different areas around bushcraft and survival, but then also people who are making arduous journeys, people who are doing some quite tough expeditions, people who are doing big hikes or big paddles, who might end up in situations where bushcraft or survival skills would be useful. And I think what's interesting about talking to some of those people as well is how they avoid getting into those situations in the first place. You know, if all you ever do is stay in your backyard, you're probably never going to need your bushcraft and survival skills unless there's some sort of zombie apocalypse or collapse of society. But the people who go out and do these big trips, they're going to need some of those skills on a day-to-day basis, just as bush skills, as camp skills, and they're also going to need potentially some of those skills as backstop skills. So it's interesting to hear about how they approach their trips and their journeys, their mindset as well, which we can all benefit from. So I like to have that, you know, diverse fabric of material on the podcast, and you don't have to listen to all of them, of course. I know some people prefer some to others, but dive into those, have a listen, look at the list of people, everything there from survival psychology to canoe tripping to edible wild plants and everything in between. Lots and lots of interesting stuff there from a range of experts and very experienced people. So I would encourage you to do that. And if you've liked this episode, press like. If you liked this, press subscribe as well on my YouTube channel in particular, or on a podcast channel. That's always very useful for my numbers. And of course, the next one that comes out, you will be informed when it pops up in your feed. So you don't want to miss out, particularly if you're asking questions. So that's it. Thank you for listening. I'm going to go and pack up now. I'm finished here for the weekend, and it's great to add another Ask Paul Kirtley to the series. Squeeze that in before I have to leave the woods for the moment. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Enjoy the outdoors. Cheers.